joining us today for our Caregiving Essentials Webinar, Care Mapping, a Tool for Clarity and Wellbeing. My name is Christine Kennedy, and on behalf of the Office of Alumni Engagement and McMaster Continuing Education, I'd like to welcome you, the audience, and of course, our special guests today, Rajiv Mehta and Stephanie Muskat, and Donna Thomson, of course, will be hosting as always. Before I introduce Rajiv and Stephanie, as is customary with all of our McMaster webinars and in-person events, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the land on which we reside, McMaster University, I'm here on campus today, recognizes and acknowledges that it is located on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and Haudenosaunee Nations and within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. So thanks, everyone. As usual, I'm going to go through a little bit of housekeeping. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to throw that in the chat. One of the wonderful aspects of the Caregiving Essentials Webinar Series is this is an opportunity for people to share. So the chat function is fully open. So just be careful what you put in because everyone is able to read that. But we do encourage you to contribute and to let everyone know how you're enjoying it. If there are some things that you want to provide to other people, it's a great forum for people to learn from one another. If you'd like the closed captioning feature to activate it, if you go on the bottom, you'll see the three little dots, click on that and you can activate the closed captioning. And as always, this event webinar is being recorded and you'll be receiving a link to that with some of the resources that Rajiv and Stephanie are going through. So look forward to that landing in your inbox probably later in the week or first thing next week. And that is about it. So lots of people online today. Thanks for submitting your questions. Those questions will be delivered through another document because we had so many. And there's so much material to go through today. So Donna actually took the time to answer those and those will be delivered sort of outside of the webinar today. But please do ask questions in the Q&A and in the chat because Donna will go through that. Okay, Donna, our host, Donna Thomson, the wonderful Donna Thomson. Everyone knows her. She is a caregiver, author, and educator. She is the author of 2 best-selling books on caregiving, including The Unexpected Journey of Caring. Donna also facilitates our free online courses. There are the 2 now for Caregiving Essentials. She's also the co-designer of the Creating Caregiver-Friendly Workplaces and co-designer and co-instructor of the Family Engagement in Research course, all of which are held at McMaster. Now our 2 guest speakers, Rajiv Mehta. He is the CEO of nonprofit Atlas of Care and has spent the past 2 decades exploring how to nurture thriving families and communities of belonging. He studied engineering at Princeton and Stanford and business at Columbia, conducted research at NASA, and led product innovation at Apple, Adobe, and other tech companies. Yes, I'm feeling a bit of an underachiever in Rajiv's midst, before turning his attention to social issues. He has served on boards and advisory panels of several nonprofit government panels and university research programs and consulted to a wide range of organizations. Stephanie Muskat is in Toronto and she is a proud McMaster alumna. She is an award-winning registered social worker and psychotherapist. She is the founder of Compassion in Caregiving, a mental health organization aimed to support caregivers and almost has a decade of experience as an inpatient social worker in acute care, where her work was focused primarily on caregivers and those they care for. Stephanie is the host of the popular podcast, Caregivers Compass, and has been featured on numerous television networks and radio stations, presented to audience regularly, and sits on several committees and advocacy groups for caregivers. I am so thrilled to hear the 3 of you talk about care mapping. So let's go to it. Thanks, Donna, Rajiv, and Stephanie for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much, Christine. I am so excited to be here today. I am a good friend of you both, Stephanie and Rajiv, and I have a whole chapter on Rajiv's work in The Unexpected Journey of Caring. It's just a transformational resource that I have used personally in my own caring life too. And before we get to care mapping, what is it? How can we all benefit from it? I just want to ask you both, Stephanie and Rajiv, starting with you, Rajiv. Um, how did you come to this work? We've heard about your academic credentials as an engineer, but how did you land in caregiving? How did that happen?
Well, it started off with me poking around as an engineer in the healthcare space and, what the company I was working with could do over there. And I kept hearing of the problem of non-adherence, and sort of the criticism of us people of either being not enough understanding of what we needed to do to care for ourselves or essentially being too lazy. And
Mm.
it struck me that point of view is just misguided because we do so much to take care of ourselves on a day-to-day basis. To criticize the places where we're sort of falling short seemed wrong. And so I started focusing in this space really from this perspective, how could we help people do whatever it is they choose to do to care for themselves? And over the years, just as my habit from the world of technology, I didn't sort of read academic studies about caregiving. I just spent time with people. Anybody I could talk to, I'd go into their homes, poke around, ask lots of questions of how they were caring for each other, and kind of came to appreciate what the reality of caregiving was like. And to my utter surprise, within a few years, I was an expert on family caregiving because I had done the crazy thing of going and spending time in people's homes. And so, kind of one thing led to the next. I was invited to join the board of the Family Caregiver Alliance.
Right.
In 2014, in the US, I created a roundtable of experts in caregiving, and which led to a lot of research in this space. So, as odd as it sounds, it's like one thing led to the next as I got more and more passionate about this question of how do we people care for ourselves, our families, our communities, and what can be done to help us do that much more, how to leverage our own innate capacity and talent and humanity in doing what we do.
Mm. I just love that so much. My heart's beating fast in my chest because I am so passionate about the values that underpin, what you said about the capacities that we all
Yeah,
have,
yeah.
and that in the privacy of our own home. Rajiv, I remember once you talked about caregiving, and maybe you can just allude to this quickly, that it's like cooking. Do you remember saying that?
Now you'll have to remind me because I'm
Okay, you
completely
said that to
incompetent
me
cook,
once. Yeah, you said that to me once. It's something that we do naturally. Some people, are gourmet cooks and have done cordon bleu, and some people just heat up a microwave meal. But it's so embedded in our daily life that we don't even notice it. And a lot of the work that you do is about noticing, and something that you call personal science. Isn't
Yeah,
that
yeah. I mean, I think what you're alluding to is this point that we, in the profession, we tend to think of caregiving as being restricted to caring for someone with a really serious illness, and that's when it's caregiving. And I was making the point that no, we care for each other all the time in little ways. The barista smiles at you and makes you feel good is actually important and worthwhile. And so, in that sense, we are all caring for each other all the time. And so caregiving and care receiving is not limited to medical circumstances. It's what we do in everyday life. And we need to sort of be more aware of it and celebrate that.
Yeah. Oh, I couldn't agree more. Stephanie, you and I think I originally found you online somehow and got in touch and a couple of years ago and just said, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe that someone, a therapist, a psychotherapist, and your background is social work, is making a niche practice in serving the therapeutic needs of caregivers." And a few years ago, I forgot to mention this to our webinar team here at McMaster, but a few years ago, you were a guest on this webinar series in a webinar called "Help, I'm a Caregiver, I Need Therapy." And then these years later, you were telling me that now you are working with Rajiv on a new workshop that explores care mapping. Before we get into the resource of the care map itself, can you just briefly, Stephanie, tell us a little bit about how you came to be focused on the experiences of family caregivers?
Sure, and thank you for having me. It's such an honor to be back. Ironically enough, I was in my undergrad at McMaster when my mother was diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia. It was at that time, many years ago, 14 and 15 years ago, when I needed my own support for my own mental health. I'm an only child, and I didn't know what to do. I was very lost. And I was actually going back and forth from Hamilton to Toronto, trying to figure out what was going on. And I couldn't find specialized supports for me. And I saw a huge gap at the time. And once things stabilized after undergrad, I conducted a lot of mental health research at some major hospitals in the city. And one of which was at Mount Sinai through their Reitman Carers program. And it was continuously opening my eyes to the fact that there weren't enough supports. Then I became a social worker. I worked inpatient at a large institution in Toronto for almost 9 years. And the thing that kept popping up was there aren't enough mental health supports for caregivers. Or I would be working with patients and families in crisis, significant crisis. And they would say, well, what do we do now? We've been working with you in the hospital. We're going home. We need someone like you to help us. And I would say, I'm really sorry. I don't know anybody. And so when it was 2020, the pandemic, and I was working inpatient during the time, and I saw just how horrible things were for caregivers and their family members, I realized, okay, this has to change. I've been through it myself, and I also know what other people are going through, and I get it. I truly get it. And so I started my mental health practice, which was just, I guess, 3.5 years ago. And since then, it's really been tremendous. And I am so fortunate to get to work with caregivers every single day. And I just feel so grateful.
Oh, thank you for that. We are grateful for you both. Now let's get into this fantastic resource of the Atlas CareMap. And I just wanted to show a slide first of my own care map that I drew. And this is only to reassure people that you do not need to be an artist to draw a care map. So I don't know, you can see how messy this is. And I felt very nervous with the blank page in front of me, but I just started with that little house in the middle with me and my husband, me and Jim, my husband. And then I began to think about who else is in our caring life. I was caring for multiple family members, and I was trying to figure out where are they, who are they? And of course, Rajiv is going to tell us about some of the prompt questions that you can help to reflect on. This was my very first care map. I have done lots of them as things progressed, but I just wanted to show everybody this to say, you know what? Everybody can do this with a piece of paper and a pencil. And it's such a transformative exercise. So Rajiv, can you tell us a little bit about how is this care map transformational?
I'm sure. As people can see, one of the results of the care map process is a very simple drawing, stick figures, arrows. It's really your circumstances, your ecosystem, your friends and family and others that are involved, with the arrows showing who is caring for whom. And before I sort of go into that, I thought I'd share with you, Christine, we can take the slides off for the moment. I thought I'd share with you just a few quick stories of the impact, because it just shows each person's circumstances can be very different. So one story was a young woman who, at the time she drew her care map, had been suffering from long COVID for almost a year. And as she drew her care map, one of the things that was deeply gratifying was basically recognizing that never mind how sick she was still actively caring for her partner, and felt, just some sort of relief that she wasn't only receiving things, that she was still herself, still doing things, and that was gratifying. On the other hand, as she drew lots of friends and family and on her map and realized how little support she was getting, she got very, very angry about this. Why aren't people being more supportive of my situation? And at the same time, she grew very frustrated as she remembered what life was like before COVID, when she was this go-getter of a person, supremely confident, able, and just go, go, go all the time. And that's when, in a sense, the blinders went off. And she's like, oh my gosh, people aren't helping because I've been actively turning them away. It was, it felt to her so insulting that someone would offer to help her that she would be quite rude. And she realized that she had to get over her own sense of ableism to allow family and friends to help her. So in this case, drawing the care map was a realization of her own self that made a huge difference in her situation. So even if you will, a patient can find tremendous value from drawing a care map of their lives. A different story, this man, Phil Alvarado, he was a retired school teacher, and he had drawn a care map about his family, with a lot of emphasis on his mother in her 90s, who he took care of and so forth. And as he was talking about his care map, he pointed out that he also included his grandson on there, his 5-year-old grandson, and he babysat him. And he said, that's caregiving also. And in doing that, all of a sudden, it dawned on him that whenever that grandson came over to his house, in fact, the first thing he would do would be go spend an hour with his great-grandmother. And that for his great-grandmother, that was the highlight of her week. And so to Phil, the dawning realization was that 5-year-old boy was an active caregiver for his great-grandmother, that it wasn't, he knew she. And so sometimes this helps us recognize kind of the reality of care in our families, because under normal circumstances, we do not think of 5-year-old boys as being caregivers, but in reality, I know my own nephew was very active in caring for his grandmother when she was ill. So just another little story. The last one to tell you is a woman named Susanna Fox, who's very involved in the world of healthcare. And Susanna has used the CareMap tool many times in her family, especially for elders and so forth. And one time she was helping one of her family members who was, nearing the end of his life. And he's a retired architect. And so, even though he was getting older, he's very active and bright in that sort of way. And he just loved the whole idea of a drawing of his care ecosystem. And so she taught him what to do, and he just went to town. So the next time she came back, he had drawn this really thorough care map and included basically everyone he could think of who was in some way caring for him. He included his auto mechanic and the gardener and all sorts of stuff, and had written down, having gone through this, he put down detailed notes for Susanna on, here's how this person helps me, here's their contact information and all, which, as you can imagine, turned out to be incredibly valuable to Susanna over the final months of his life, that she was his primary caregiver and she had access to all this knowledge. The other thing that her relative did, which was just lovely, was after he had drawn his care map, he reached out to every single person he had included on his care map to tell them that he had included him on the care map and how they supported his life. And basically, as Susanna said, his care map was an expression of love in his world.
Oh my goodness, that is so touching. Oh, that's wonderful, because we all know the power of gratitude in our lives, but sometimes it feels a bit false. That's so authentic though, and very, very touching. Ross has shared in the chat that he says, for my care map, I found I needed a blank separate page for doctors. Every clinic I visited with my mother, I needed to add. Was interesting that I was getting more direct and immediate information that my mother's attending physician. his information was often weeks out of date. And I think this underscores the idea that the CareMap is constantly changing. It's an evolving process of this tool that can help us understand the progression of disease and what's that means, or aging, and what that means to the relationships that we depend upon.
Yes, and in fact, why don't I share those 3 slides we had prepared on
Yes,
the care map?
do
So
that.
Christine,
Thank
if you
you.
could put that up.
Here we go. Thanks, Christine.
Yeah, so just to say a few more words about the care map, it's basically when you're drawing this thing, the process you go through is asking yourself the question, who all do I care for? So in this particular example, this woman, Christine, she is actively caring for her son, Pablo, who has diabetes, and her mother-in-law next door. And you have these arrows and stick figures showing the key people in here. And sometimes people use triangles to represent care professionals. Sometimes people use little squares to represent other types of things. In this case, there's a daycare facility that's involved. But it's really, who all do I care for? Who else cares for them? And who cares for me? And really, it's a start of a question, because in some sense, you could theoretically just keep going. And the diagram, it is a simplification of reality, of course. The few things that are emphasized in here are presence. So the closer people are together in the middle of the map means they're near you. The people on the edges are far away. But also, there's these 2 kind of circles, and the inner circle represents people that are within 20 minutes, and the outer circle is within 2 hours. And that helps you get a sense of who is involved. And the thickness of the arrows also represents how often they are involved. So a simplification, but it also is all types of care. So whatever is meaningful to you is represented in the diagram. And why don't we move on to the next slide? This is an example of a family in Sacramento, California, where the 3 adults, Hannah, Gaston, and Harvey, are all very actively caring for each other. All of them have some sort of health issues. In particular, Harvey and Gaston have a whole lot of health issues. But when they drew this diagram, it gave them an appreciation for how intertwined their lives are. We, in the kind of healthcare community, tend to speak of caregivers and care recipients or patients. The reality in most families that I've interacted with is that everybody is actively caring for someone and being cared for, and often deeply involved in their own care. So from the point of view of families, these labels are not limiting. In a sense, all labels apply to us. And as this one example shows. The last example I wanted to show, the next slide, please, Christine. This was actually drawn by an 8-year-old boy. And part of the point here is that this is really easy. Anyone can do it. I redrew it, so that's my writing, because there were some things that were very personal that shouldn't be made public, and so forth. But the gist of it is here. And so there's that 8-year-old boy drawing himself in the house, and he feels that he does a lot every day to care for his grandfather. And his grandfather is drawn short and fat, and his grandmother is drawn tall and thin, because that's what they look like, as he told me. And you can see the kinds of people he has in here. There's his best friend, there's a school, there's another family. He also included his cat, and the cat is in a cloud, because he explained to me his cat has died, but he is sure that his cat is still actively caring for him, and he feels reassured by his cat's presence.
Wow.
So one of the most important things about drawing care maps is you put on the care map what you feel is important. You don't have to pay any attention to my instructions or anybody else's. Once you get the hang of it, it's your care map. Do with it what you will. And I want to come back to the question that Donna had commented on, which is for most people, the first time they draw their care map, there's almost never medical professionals involved. They are not top of mind for most people. We only start adding them later. And I encourage people to do the care map very quickly. Just do what's top of mind and see what comes out, and kind of stop and pause there and see that, oh, this is what I think of, rather than going all out and making it full or complete. There's time for that. You come back to that. And the last thing I wanted to pick up on, Donna, your comment that this is a point in time. Tomorrow, you might draw a very different care map because the circumstances have changed. Many people have drawn care maps many times, partly to kind of recognize, oh, this is now the new situation I'm in. People have also drawn care maps in retrospect to kind of get a better appreciation of the journey they have gone through. People have also used the care map with my encouragement, but never mind, about 5 years from now. What might it look like? What might you do now to prepare for that? And so forth. So
That's just fantastic. I just, I love the cat in heaven too.
Yeah.
And you often, Rajiv, remind people not to forget their pets when they're drawing a care map, and also not to forget their spouse. Because I remember you saying that some people are so close to some members of their family that when they're thinking of these plotting on a piece of paper, these care relationships, it's hard to identify those people who are almost our mirror twin in a way, somehow, over years.
It's so true. We often forget our spouses, our sisters, because they're just there. And part of the reflection is thinking about that and so forth. But I thought we'd turn it over to Stephanie for a moment, because she's been using this with her the clients and so forth, and to kind of get her perspectives on how this has been useful from that point of view.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So is it okay if we go off the slide deck for a second? So I just wanted to share a bit about where I've come from, and also how incorporating this theoretically has been really important, because most of my clients who are caregivers come to me when they're very, very upset, when they're very anxious, when they're feeling very sad. And oftentimes they do feel very, very isolated and alone. They've gotten to a point where they feel as though they have nobody. And in theory, in social work school, we're taught this ecosystemic framework, which I'll show you if I'm allowed to share my screen, of what that looks like and the difference between that and what it is now. But essentially, can you see this image? So essentially, we're taught this, where we look at an individual, a client, and you can see that there is a circle of them as who they are as an individual, then who is around them as their family and relationships, then their community and cultural factors and society, and how each interplays with one another. And so in practice with clients, I would usually look at this and say, okay, you're clearly feeling upset. This is how you're impacted from a societal perspective, potentially economically, or potentially from work, from your community. Here are the resources you can tap in, et cetera. But what we're doing is we're making lists, right? We're looking at who it is that is in your network verbally. And a lot of times people still are not able to see who it is that supports them and provides care for them. Using a care map is an excellent way for clients to not just think of theoretically, okay, fine, I have, the person down the street, I have my sister, but I'm still feeling really upset and potentially even abandoned by them. They can look and draw and go through their own experience of, oh, wait a second, I actually have this thing in front of me where I can see it may not be my sister that I feel that has abandoned me. It may not be my neighbor down the street. I actually do feel supported by my cousin who might live in Uruguay. I had a client like this who actually does FaceTime or video call my mom or whoever it is that I'm caring for, and therefore they are part of my care network. What I also really like about the care map is that It's a visual aid and a visual reminder. And I will ask my clients to often print visual reminders when possible and put it up, because when they're in such a negative state of mind and they're waking up every day feeling anxious, overwhelmed, and they have this ongoing thought process of I'm alone, I'm isolated, I have nobody, look at your care map, remind yourself who you have, who can you tap into, even on the far right side, on the far left side, who is there that if you don't have, you know, the people closest to you today, you still have other people and you're not alone, and we'll process all of that together. The other thing I like is that they can work on it ongoing, right? So as Raj said, as things are changing, you can always look back and say, okay, fine, mom was moved from this facility to that facility, so this is my new care community. And it's not just communities. People write down Instagram groups, people write down Facebook groups, people write down all sorts of things. So when they're feeling like, oh my gosh, the person in the center isn't supporting me, I'm going to go and tap into the Facebook group because that's where I really need the support right now. It's a great representation and a visual reminder, and it really helps clients.
Mm-hmm. Can both of you talk a little bit about some of the prompt questions that are available online to help people understand the meaning of what they've drawn? So what should
Sure.
people be asking themselves?
Yeah, at the end, we'll give you links to all the free resources on this. But we provide a set of simple, seemingly simple questions to ask yourself after you've drawn your care map, and what might I learn from this? You know, and it ranges from starting to look at what you have drawn. And so as an example, do the people you have included in there, are they even aware of each other? And, you know, sometimes among siblings, we get mad at the others for not doing anything because honestly, we're not there when they're doing. And so are people aware of how they're, we also encourage people to look closely and see how different people may be helping in different ways. So here's this family member who just has like a lovely bedside manner and is a good person to have around. On the other hand, there's this other family member who's kind of really lousy at that, but is so amazing at doing Google searches and finding information and so forth. And so recognizing that within our friends and family, people have different talents, different capabilities, and they're providing them in different ways, and seeing that. Sometimes it's also like, you know, if you have drawn a lot of people on your care map, that feels nice, but we also know that it comes with an enormous overhead of communication and coordination and keeping everybody happy and involved. And so it gives you an opportunity to sort of pause and think, how is that happening? So there's a series of questions like that about what have you drawn to reflect on. We also have a series of questions that sounds kind of odd, but on what's missing. And so as an example, Donna, it's like one of the first questions was like, have you forgotten anybody important? You know, have you forgotten your spouse and so forth? We also ask people to think about the friends and family who you think could be more involved, and to just pause for a moment and ask yourself, why is it that they're not? So oftentimes people aren't involved because they're waiting to be invited. They don't feel like they can just step in to help, but maybe you can ask them. Other times, this pause for reflection helps you recognize that, oh my gosh, they are so busy in their own life that honestly asking them is not fair. And so maybe you want to be cautious about that. So just being thoughtful. Likewise, you ask yourself, you know, are there professional services that could be helpful? Now, for most of us, this is like a question you can't answer because it's like, well, if I knew, I would have brought them in.
Yeah.
And so it could be an opportunity for friends and family and professionals to highlight, oh, there is such a thing available. The last but absolutely not least thing that we encourage people to do is actually pause and recognize what is there, to have that sense of gratitude, to celebrate that. We are so often in the fix-it mode of what's missing that encouraging people to pause. And in fact, the reality is in almost all the workshops I've done over many, many years, the most common expression people have afterwards is that of the gratitude and celebration of what they discovered was there, even more than discovering the gaps that still need filling. So these questions help you think through that.
Mhm. One of the questions I asked myself, which I think is in the workbook, which if everyone wants to explore this personally, after this webinar, you can go to Atlas of Care. I think the URL is atlasofcaregiving.com still, Rajiv, is it?
Yep.
Yeah. And you can look at research and tools and resources, click on care mapping, and there's a downloadable workbook that brings you through all how to do this exercise. And one of the questions that I asked myself on my messy care map was, who could replace me if something happens to me? And it's not that you need to have an answer to that question, but it's a very helpful resource to begin to think about it and to use as a conversation starter with family, with friends, with care professionals who may be on that care map too. So maybe Stephanie, can you talk a little bit about how people, once they've drawn a basic care map, who do they show it to, and why, and for what purpose?
Yeah, so I would say that most of my clients keep it to themselves. I think a lot of them want to know for their own selves where their support lies. But it is really helpful, especially if someone is admitted to the hospital and you are coming in and you're so overwhelmed because the person you're caring for is admitted. You might use it to show other healthcare practitioners, here is who is in my circle, right? It's not just me. I think a lot of caregivers feel like they are assumed to be the only one involved, to be the major one involved. And although that is often the case upfront, that is definitely not the case behind the scenes. And it's important to let our teams know who is involved. And so from that perspective, I would definitely encourage people to show it to whoever's on the team to reduce a lot of the burden on the caregiver themselves showing up. But I think it is primarily used as a tool to emphasize to my clients, I'm not alone, right? And when I am feeling betrayed, when I am feeling like I'm on my own in this entire thing, I'm not. And I think, as Raj said, it's really meaningful. I think once some of the dust settles and once maybe some of the stressors are down, people can show it to whoever was on there and say, you got me through, right? You were one of the people who was on this, and you may not have known this, but you were in my heart. I thought about you all the time. So I think in that way, it's just a beautiful connection piece, even after the major use for someone who might be my client, to just say, you were meaningful and important to me. Even the gardener, right? Some people want to include the gardener to say, you were on my care map because I couldn't do the things around the house. And you were someone that actually really helped. I had all of these things that I couldn't tend to, and you were there. And I'm sure that would be really eye-opening, right? For a gardener who just thinks he's coming and doing daily work.
Yeah, I remember in my own life, when our son was pretty much living in the hospital for years, and he was just so frequently an inpatient. And the days before parking was automated, there was a lady in the parking booth that took the tickets and you paid her. And every day she said, how is your son? And then she started saying, how is Nicholas? And we chatted because I would be leaving, late at night and arriving early in the morning. There wasn't a queue of cars behind. So I just chat with her every day. And she would have been one of those people who made my day better every day by just that personal connection of kindness and caring. Yeah, I think it's funny because Stephanie, you and I have talked about that many caregivers, as you said earlier, just a couple minutes ago, people will often think, I don't have anybody. There is no one I can put on my care map. And if we think a little bit differently about who is reflecting on our day or our week, who made us smile, who made us feel a human connection. And it doesn't need to be somebody in the immediate family, does it?
No, it absolutely doesn't. I mean, for me, you saying that, I think back to this mentor I had before I had gone into social work school, and we would just go for walks while my mom was sick. She had no idea that she was meaningful to me in this way, but she had had her own mother who had been sick, and she told me stories. And I never really told her how meaningful that was to me, but it meant a lot to relate to somebody because I didn't have anybody.
Yeah.
She was like, it would have been a blip in the care map, you know, she was
Yeah.
this just a mentor. But you're absolutely right. It can be people that we don't even think are part of our immediate network. And that's the really important piece, is that we tend to, when we're feeling so low and overwhelmed, think I really have no one. There's these absolutes, right? And these are messages that our minds give ourselves when we get to these places, especially burnout. And it's so eye-opening to see, wait a second, I'm not actually by myself. I mean, there's also a process involved, right? We process all of that and what that means, because these are narratives we've told ourselves for so long. But it's not true a lot of the time.
Yeah. Flipping that, I wonder whether or not either or both of you have an opinion or an experience with something that might occur about differing perceptions of how much people are contributing in a circle of care. So when you draw a care map, if someone is giving, the person who is drawing the care map says, you know, my mother is supporting me a lot. And you will draw a thick line with an arrow from the mother to yourself. A sister who supports you, sometimes that would be represented with a dotted line. So what if you showed that to your sister and my sister said, what? I feel like I really support you a lot. But that's not the perception of the person. Do you ever get those situations where different people looking at the same picture have different opinions about what's happening?
Well, in fact, all the time. Basically, we all have our perceptions. And I've often, in some of the workshops I've led, had couples who've come in and who've drawn their own sitting side by side, and then they compare them and they discover they have different perceptions of things. And in fact, this is really good. In the fact that it stimulates the conversation is really, really important. There was one of the first workshops I had done. Afterwards, this woman talked about how she and her sisters were here in the US while her brother was still back in Mexico caring for their parents. And she said that she and her sisters had always been complaining about what a poor job he did in caring for them. But in drawing the care map, it suddenly dawned on her that, oh my God, our brother has basically put his life on hold to do the best he can. Instead of all this moaning, let's recognize how much he is doing. And so this happens a lot. You know, you have different perspectives. And it sounds weird, but I found families have an easier time talking about the map, that you drew the map differently, than talking about the issue. So having this slight difference, this distance for having that difference of opinion, makes the conversation easier.
Mm-hmm.
And that matters. It matters.
It absolutely does. And talking about going deeper into this and beginning to have multiple conversations and gathering multiple perspectives on this exercise. Can you tell us a little bit? I'm very excited to share with people that you both have developed a workshop for people who are wanting to deeply explore their care ecosystem, and maybe especially those people who think they don't have anyone. Can you tell us about your workshop?
Yeah, so we have developed two workshops actually that we're offering at different times. One is specifically for caregivers who are going through the process and want to learn more about exploring care maps, but also processing these feelings that come along with realizing, oh, wait a second, all of the things that I thought for so many years may be different, but also maybe I need to rejig and rethink about all of this, right? So we come together to take that mental health lens and also the lens of the CareMap process. We also have a training for clinicians specifically, not just therapists, but clinicians across the board who can learn this to use with their patients, their clients, because no caregiver is one size fits all, and they all come with a lot in the background. And no matter what they're coming forward with, this is a very important tool. So we have created both of those. And we have a wait list up on our website, actually, for anyone who's interested when it does come out to learn more and to sign up when it becomes available.
Mhm. But in the meantime, if people do want to jump in and try making your own care map, there are lots of resources and stories of different people who have drawn a care map, I guess in workshops that you've done, Rajiv, and there's wonderful storytelling. And I think through that storytelling as well, and the basic instructions of how to do it yourself, it gives people an opportunity to think outside the box of the narratives that we've been telling ourselves for so long. Like you said, Stephanie, sometimes we get stuck in believing that the circumstances of our lives are immovable and that they are within the rigidity of the stories we're telling ourselves. I am alone, there is no hope, and all of these things that you begin to get entrenched with those circular thoughts, and there's no way out. I do, and I don't, I'm certainly not saying that in a critical way. I think there are a lot of very good reasons that people do get stuck in those ruts of thinking, but a care map in a way can blow it up. And I am thinking about a woman you told a story about, Rajiv, in the workbook, who was doing everything for everybody in her house. And then she began to ask her husband to do the dishes and her son to set the breakfast table. Do you know the story that I mean?
Yeah, it was her name is Betty,
That's
and
it,
Betty
Betty.
had been in a workshop that I'd been teaching in Santa Barbara, and it had been quite the cathartic experience. So Betty, as she drew her care map in the workshop, had broken down in tears, and we had to comfort her and all. And she told afterwards that as she was driving home, she had this sense of just being overwhelmed and exhausted. Because as you're saying, she was caring for some elderly folks, she was holding down a job, she was helping in the community, and so forth. And the realization on her drive home was that she had to stop pretending to be Super Betty.
Mhm.
And so when she got home, she sat down with her husband and, the older children, and sort of talked about this. And as it turned out, they were like happy to help. They had been hesitant to offer help before because they did not want to insult their mother, his wife, because she would have taken it as an insult that anyone thought that she needed help. So this was that change in mindset. And as you say, they were so happy to step in and do stuff. And I mean, 2 months later, when I met her again, this is like a different person. She's joking about having pina coladas after dinner because she had so much time on her hands. So it was a big deal. And to pick up on what you're saying, Donna, there is, on the website, atlasofcaregiving.com/caremap, which has been listed on the, in the chat, there is a lot of information. There is kind of the basic information that a zillion people have found more than enough to get started on this. But there's also a very detailed self-paced tutorial that people can go through, which has a ton of videos and exercises that you can do to get a really rich experience. And, you know, even given those, the reason Stephanie and I are doing these workshops is that we have found that when people learn with each other, when they're sharing their discoveries with each other, when they're discussing, oh, my life is like this, my life is like that, the learning is just exponentially more powerful. There's that deep sense of realizing that you're not alone, that you're not unusual in having both sort of the good sides and the challenges. And so it's so much more powerful. I mean, we human beings, that's the way we learn. You know, given my background, I like to say that you really can teach yourself physics from a textbook, but honestly, it's a lot easier with an instructor and a classmates.
Yeah.
And caregiving is equally as hard. And so, again, we've provided all the help we can. Workshops make a difference.
Oh, I think so too. I mean, I know that it was a watershed moment for me at home alone, drawing my own care map. And I can tell you that the first thing that came out at me was that I was supporting a lot of people, but I wasn't getting very much support apart from my husband. So I sort of thought, oh, I'm going to try to draw upon those there were tons of other people who were part of our ecosystem of care because our son has complex care needs, and I was looking after my mom and co-caregiving with my sister. I thought about how my sister and I could support each other more in our caregiving role with our mom. There were many realizations like that immediately. But I think to go deeper, I'm reflecting that in a situation where you have a sudden onset caregiving, like a stroke or something like that, and where there's rehabilitation and a frenzy of medical activity going on around the patient, it was like that with our son at the beginning of his life and throughout his childhood with a ton of therapy and stuff. And I remember thinking, the physio is asking me to do tons of physio exercises, and the occupational therapist is saying, do these 12 things every day. This is the key to your son being okay. And it felt like it was a matter of life or death to fit 100 million things into every day that were therapeutic. And each of those people asking those things of me, the primary caregiver, I knew had no idea what other people were asking me to do too. So this idea of what is expected of family caregivers from especially I think in sort of sudden onset where you've got that flurry of medical expectations on the part of the family caregiver, where tons of complex stuff is being downloaded. I know family caregivers who are doing all kinds of nursing duties that previously would never be done by families. And people in that kind of a position, I think it's important for everybody in the ecosystem of care to understand that piece, Rajiv, that you said about people knowing what each other is doing, and maybe demanding, asking as well.
Yeah, in fact, I would go a little further. One of the really key ideas in the CareMap, unlike sort of circles of support and so forth, is that there is no center. Too often we put the patient in the center, whereas we as human beings, we have multiple responsibilities. I mean, as an example, which was just so, a woman in one of my workshops talked about when she was going through chemo because she had cancer, and her doctors had told her, this is really important. You have to give all your attention to this. You're suffering from serious cancer. And she's like, looks at them and says, well, yeah, but I'm caring for my dad with dementia. That's not stopping. And so we, as these professionals outside, putting this burden on the caregiver, saying that this is the only, it's like, no, please accept this is the reality of my life. Work with me.
Oh, that's fantastic. And that is, I think, the most perfect way to end any of our webinars that we've ever had. I think it's the perfect ending. Thank you so, so much, Rajiv and Stephanie. It's just been a real pleasure to speak with you both and learn from you. I'd like to thank everybody here and the team from McMaster too. And this is the last of our webinar series for this academic year. We're going to be taking a break. Christine, over to you to tell us a little bit about what's next in our series.
What's next? Well, I think Donna, you and I, we're going to meet and we're going to talk about who we're going to line up, but we will be back September. And for those of you who are regular, we'll start in September and we'll have one every month until June. So keep your eyes peeled on the inbox. Now, if you are, I can't do two things at once. So you might have to just get all of the links later. Just a reminder that the Essentials Caregiving course is still open until October. But if you're pressed for time, it will start up again in October. So maybe if you're feeling, yes, I want to take it, but you just don't think the summer is a good time, which is understandable, it will be open in October. So it closes, it's now running, but it closes in August and it reopens in October. And we'll be kicking off the 2024-25 Caregiving Essentials Webinar Series with a big talk in September. We had Andre Picard last year, and we will get someone equally as informative and probably even more entertaining. Dun, 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 dun. So stay tuned. So thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Rajiv and Stephanie. It was a wonderful talk, as you can tell by the chat, so many great comments, and you really impacted people positively. Someone commented, this is going to be their new North Star, this CareMap. So thanks everyone. You'll get a recording of this with all of those links. So look for that. Thank you and have a great afternoon. And we're going to put up the last slide with all of Raj's and Stephanie's information. There it goes. So if you want to maybe take a picture of that, but you'll get all of this information. So don't worry if you don't get it right now. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.